Hi there, welcome to week 5. Hopefully you're feeling comfortable with things, you're feeling like you're moving on along. If you're not, please feel free to let me know. Send me an email, let me know you're feeling a little lost so that I can try to be a little bit more specific for you in what you need. This week we're talking again still about research, design, and measurement. You're still reading Babbie, chapters 4 and 5. And hopefully, if you listened to my video last week, you concentrated most on chapter 4 last week. This week, I want you to concentrate the most on chapter 5. Although they are all interrelated and they all go together, I think that will help ease your absorption of the material. So in chapter 5, we hear a lot about measurement. So we talked last week about the units of analysis and all that stuff, and now we're talking about how we actually measure. What do we want to know and how do we measure it? And it's important when we measure in research that we are being very, very careful. We're being very deliberate about how we're going to observe this phenomena and how we are going to measure it. Whether we're going to quantify it or describe it in rich detail, it's important that we have a plan, a systematic plan. You cannot just walk into research and just say, I just want to know, I want to investigate marital satisfaction. I'm just going to ask a bunch of people how happy they are in their marriage. That won't work. You have to be much more systematic about it. As you'll be able to see as you read chapter 5. I think that'll become very clear to you. Again, this book does a very good job of laying out the key concepts, which this week happen to be concepts. So I'm not going to go into too much detail explaining those things, because the book, I think, does a fabulous job. If you disagree and you don't understand what the book is saying to you, let me know. But I do want to just sort of highlight how important all this stuff is. You might be sitting here thinking, yeah, but we've got I'm worried about how do I write this proposal. All of the information that you're gathering in these weeks is the information that you need to write your proposal. But it all starts with something that's interesting to you. What is a topic that's of interest to you? So, for example, my interest is obviously surrounding childcare, most specifically childcare quality. And so that's a concept. When we hear childcare quality, it brings to mind certain definitions. But when I am doing a study on quality, I have to carefully define it. I have to use measures that are valid and reliable and precise and accurate and all of those things. So it's important that I do my research. I go into the literature and I find out what other people are using, and I read the write-ups of the first time that these measures were used and established. I read the technical reports of these measures so that I understand what their reliability and validity are and how those were determined. So it just gets more and more complicated, doesn't it? You'll read in your chapter this week all about conceptions, concepts, reality. Now remember, reality is how close we get to that is going to depend on your philosophical stance, but our chapter addresses that. But most of the things that we study in the social sciences are not tangible items. For example, I'm sitting here at my desk and I'm looking at this stapler. This is a physical object. I can hold it, touch it, feel it. I can describe it. I can take a photograph of it. I can show it to you, and we can all agree what color it is. When we're talking about the social sciences, though, we're talking about things that are a little bit harder to define, like love, hate, satisfaction, quality, communication. These are things that we can't touch. So we have to come up with ways that we can have agreed upon definitions, agreed upon creations, if you will, based on these observations. And so that's what the measurement piece we do. That's what the measurement piece does in our research methods. So you can see it's this. You'll hear every week I'll say this is like the heart and soul of research, and it's because all of these things are so important. So let's talk about on my example, childcare quality. How do I operationalize that? Well, I use measures that are established in the literature, that people have already done studies, have established validity and reliability on, and they're well known and often used in the research. And therefore, people aren't going to argue with me too much about why I use that measure and if it is accurately measuring what I think it's measuring. That's validity. Is it valid? But sometimes you might come across things where you don't have something like that, and so you have to either establish your own measure, which is not something I suggest doing for for your proposal in this class, and you'll see why when you read about all the different ways, all the things you have to do to establish reliability and validity. But it's important to know what those things are, so that when you read about when someone else has done it, you can give a credible critique of that article. When you have a master's degree, as I said the first week, you're a critical consumer of the literature, meaning you can read an article, and if they're telling you they made up a questionnaire to measure marital satisfaction, and this is how they established reliability, you need to be able to read that and say, okay, they did the split test, or the split half method, and then they did a test and retest. This is what they found. I agree with their findings. I think this is a reliable measure. Okay, I can move on now. Because if you don't even think that their measure is reliable or valid, then their results are certainly not going to be something that you give a lot of credibility to. So, you're going to, if you've taken statistics, you'll see a lot of things here that you've seen before, like the levels of measurement. If you haven't, it's going to be new. Don't panic. You can still handle it. But all of these things influence your design. So it all starts back when you pick your topic. All of that sort of flows into what your study is going to look like and how you're going to make your observations. So I really want you to focus this week on understanding operationalization, conceptualization, the difference between reliability and validity. This is something that people often get very confused on. Reliability, do I get the same results more than once? Validity is if it is actually measuring what I think it's measuring. I could come up with a test that's very reliable but not valid. So that's something to be considering, to be keeping in mind. So it's a lot of stuff to take in this week. A lot of concepts and terms and definitions. I want you to absorb them. I want you to take them in. I want you to not panic too much about it, though. Apply it to what you already know and keep it in your brain to apply later. I also encourage you to begin to think about the topic or the content area that you would like to write about. Many of you have already done so, but if you haven't, now's the time to figure it out. Next week we're going to talk about how to search for resources, what's appropriate and what's not in terms of resources and reference. Good luck to you. Have a good week, and I'll see you next week, same time, same place.